Thanks for joining the Leadership Roundtable today. I have two of my friends with me, Burton Oxford and Michael Brown. We are book geeks, and we are constantly swapping books with each other or telling each other to read things that we enjoyed. It's kind of that weird, awkward moment when you're like, smell this. So I'll give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. Michael, you want to go first?
Yeah, how you guys doing? Michael Brown, good friend of John's, work closely with him. Really excited to be here today and kind of talk through leadership and my experience and what books I really enjoy.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Burton?
Yeah, good morning, guys. John, first of all, thanks for the invite. Really appreciate it, and it's an honor to join you on one of your podcast things here. Always had the opportunity to look up to you and learn a lot from you, not just from the books, but just bouncing ideas off one another from all things leadership. So really excited to join you and Mike both this morning.
Thank you. I appreciate that compliment, Burton, but you both know that I look up to both of you, and you're very regularly my voice of reason when I'm frustrated. So I appreciate that too. So we have like a long list of books that we've swapped back and forth, and we talk about this a lot. So Burton, I want to toss the mic to you first to introduce the one, and really where this idea was born is Burton and I were talking about the fact that, these leadership books that come out, they're a dime a dozen, and nobody's really coming up with new and fancy ideas. It's just a restating. So Burton, I want to toss that to you because I really liked your perspective on that.
Yeah, so the last book that you recommended was The Leadership Challenge. And as I was going through it, right at the very end, there was a reference of, a bunch of different books that, and I think it referenced whether it's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or 4 Disciplines of Execution, or 5 Levels of Leadership, or, 21 this, 10, 12, all these different things. And I just got to thinking back to all the different leadership books that I've read or listened to, and I'm a big audio listener now for the convenience. But it was funny how I finally recognized most every one of these books say the same thing. They say it differently, and they resonate with me differently. And that's when I realized the importance of me personally challenging myself to read more and more of the leadership books, because again, they all resonate a little bit differently. Yesterday or last night, when getting prepared for the meeting, I went to my bookcase and pulled out a couple of books, and it was funny going down memory lane with some of the things that I took out of them, and I was just going, "Wow, that's it's just really interesting." And one of the other ones that I picked up was Extreme Ownership. When reading through it, I learned a bunch, but then fast forward 2 years, I listened to it while on a road trip, and I picked up something completely different, which was the format or layout of each one of the chapters. The first half of the chapter was talking about experiences that they were going through. The second half of each chapter was reflecting back to those experiences and how they took extreme ownership of different scenarios. But it's just been, I just thought it was funny. I never recognized it until this particular book. And that's been, I don't know how many leadership books I've gone through over the years, but it finally resonated with me in that manner.
That's the part that stood out to me. That's the true statement that you made is, I've listened to the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership more times than I can keep track of. And there's different chapters that mean different things to me at different parts of my life and whatever I'm going through. And, since Mike and I started swapping books, I've listened to a couple of them more than once, and I know Mike has too. And you're right. It's no different than we evolve our thinking and how we process information. The books stand out differently, and the different parts of it mean something different. And I kind of see it like an onion, just the layers of it. I needed that book at that time for maybe an entry level leadership lesson. And then later on, it, kind of dropped in some more nuggets. And the truth is, there was a guy who said something to me one time, and he's a guy I worked with at a previous company, and it really hit me as, number one, profound that he would say it, but then it really has stopped me in my tracks a few times. And I think it relates to this lesson. What he said was, that thing couldn't have happened to me at that time, even though it's happened to me now and it's a really positive experience. I wasn't ready for it then. I wasn't where I needed to be. So anyway, that's what, as I was flying home yesterday, I was thinking about that conversation we had. That's really what popped into my head, is sometimes we're just not ready for the lesson in the book until later. And then, Mike, when you pointed out that the book you're going to talk about, and how you said you've read it 3 times, I thought, I'm not going to spill the beans on, I'm gonna let you spill the beans on it, but you're right, and it's a lesson that I didn't think about teaching until yesterday when we had that text exchange, that I tell people, just constantly be reading, constantly be going through it. But there's, when my wife watches this, she's going to make fun of me because I won't watch a movie twice. But sometimes there's a lot of value to going back and rereading something or re-listening to something that you've already listened to.
That's it, is John. It's interesting, is I did not put that perspective to it or think of it in that manner. That it's also the time in life, position that you're in, things that you're being challenged with day in and day out, and how they're going to resonate differently. And I immediately thought to my youngest nephew, who just recently graduated college, and I gave him a book for his graduation present. And he read it, called me up, got super excited, and said, "Hey man, you have another one that you recommend?" And I sent him half of my bookcase. And when you sort of say that, I immediately thought, this poor young man has no idea what any of this means. He's about to go through so many life experiences. I'm going to have to now circle back and tell him, hold those for 5 years and read them again, because they're going to mean something completely different then.
That's funny. So, Mike, have you read this book yet? The Leadership Challenge?
I have not.
Okay. So, I read this book. It was a while back, and I remember I listened to it a lot on the treadmill, and I had to keep stopping and taking notes because I was just like, it was getting me going with all these ideas. But Mike, Burton told me a story a while back that I just remembered, and it's beautiful. Burton, I'll let you tell the story, but it's the note that you wrote in the back of the book.
Yeah, so one of the things I'll do, it's interesting to see how many people actually follow through with this, and it's very, very telling in who actually takes advantage of a gift. And I've got a book here. I'll give you an example, or sort of show you. What I'll do is I'll flip about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the back of the book, and in the margin, right here on the inside of the binder, I'll put a little note in there. And by the way, not taking credit for this, my wife's boss many years ago did this to her, and she took advantage of it, and it was a phenomenal lesson for me. But you put a little note in there. Please send text that you've gotten to this page and put your phone number. It's funny how few people actually send that text. That's actually what triggered my nephew to send me a text and then immediately called me, because he was interested. Do I get another book or do I get money? And you can reward people both ways. My wife's boss, he rewarded people with sending them another book, but would also remember that when special call outs, award ceremonies, or bonuses came around and stuff like that, or promotional opportunities, because he knew those that were looking to continue to advance themselves, not just professionally, but personally as well. So yeah, it's always insightful to see who catches it and who doesn't catch it.
That I just love that idea, and I cannot wait to do it to my kids. So the leadership challenge book is actually one I started teaching that every week I would have a leadership meeting with my crew, and I would pick a very specific lesson out of each chapter and talk through it. And so I absolutely recommend it to anybody. Mike, you got me curious a little bit now. How many books do you think you've listened to or read more than once? And I don't need an exact number. I'm just curious if it's just.
It's probably only two or three. So every now and then I find a book that really resonates with me for, whatever reason. And sometimes it's just kind of that place and time in your life where you need to reassess. So you revisit that book, and there's a particular lesson in there you're prepared to receive. So those are kind of the books that I target, and that's usually how it goes.
So this one book, I'll let you intro it
Yeah.
because it's a book that, I'll be honest, I think you recommended it to me, and it was profound. So I'll go ahead and let you intro the book.
Yeah, so the book is How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton Christensen. Um, and I'll just give you a little history on my book selection. I don't necessarily target leadership specific books or business books very often. There are a few that I read. Typically, the books that I read are, about historical figures. They're about psychology and the study of the human mind. I kind of take the approach that if I can better understand myself and the people around me and the decisions that they make, it will ultimately make me a better leader. Um, and I love this book for that specific reason. It doesn't really give me the answers about this is how you become a better leader. You need to do X, Y, Z, and you'll be successful. For me, really, what it is it forces me to think critically about the decisions that I've made. Kind of assess how I determine what success is in my life, not only professionally, but also personally. And really recognize that there's an intermingling of those two worlds. They're not two separate boxes. And really taking stock on a daily basis about how do I become a better leader in the business that I work in, a better father, better husband, um, and also recognize that success is an ever evolving thing, and there's really no mountaintop.
I absolutely 100% agree with every word that just came out of your mouth. And I just, for those watching, I want to just tell a quick story just about the integrity that Mike Brown carries with him. Mike and I were traveling together in Los Angeles more than a year ago, and we are all there's I think there was four of us, if I remember correctly. It could have been five, in a really tight room. We didn't even have real desks. I believe I was standing in front of Mike as he was doing data entry. And then there was somebody standing right next to me. We were sharing a small, like 2 foot by 2 foot podium. And it's getting to be, of course, we're East Coast guys, so we're on the West Coast and our times are all off. And Mike's phone alarm goes off and he just jumps up and leaves the room. And I thought something was wrong. And we're busy, so I didn't chase after him. He came back in. I said, Mike, everything okay? He goes, oh yeah, it's just story time. And I'm like, what? And what Mike, this is a moment in life where I measured myself against another dad, and I said, wow, that's impressive. Like, because we travel, Mike's dedication to keeping with the traditions with his kids really impressed me. And Mike, after that day, I set alarms in my phone to make sure I called my kids at the times I would normally check in with them, and I've done it every day since. And so I'm grateful for that. And I think it ties into this book because when I read this book, I had lived by this philosophy for a long time, ever since my early John Maxwell days. Um, I kind of lived by the philosophy of what I'm going to spend my time on. Will my wife and kids be proud of that at my funeral? And John Maxwell in his 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership talks about how a leader spends their time when they're away from their family, how they spend their time when they're with their work family. And I know that term gets tossed around a lot, but it's something I take serious because we do spend this time developing others. We spend this time developing ourselves off of others, which I think the three of us do a lot. So anyway, the book, it hit me when you suggested it, and I very vividly remember the assignment that I was on when I read the book. And of course, I never read into why the two of you suggest a book. Generally it's, and Mike, with you specifically, I think 90% of the books that you have suggested to me have all been super entertaining, and they've been, historically based, which I love. When I first moved to Detroit, I was here for 5 months by myself, and I had a goal that I was going to listen to the biography of every US president all the way through. Like, I would pick one book written about them and listen to it. I did not get that done. Turns out there's a lot written, and those books are like 17 or 20 hours long. I did plow through a bunch of them, and I do want to point out, before I don't want to move on beyond this book just yet, because I'd like to get Burton's thoughts on it. But every book that I recommend is on my website, and I'll share that in a little bit. Burton, have you ever read this book, How You Measure Your Life?
I haven't. Mike mentioned it to me earlier this week, and it's on my wish list now. I've got a couple ahead of it, but it will be in the car with me real soon. And it's funny to hear you tell that story about Mike, because I think that was, you hit the nail on the head with how he operates, especially as a father. But Mike, you mentioned that there's only a couple of books that you've gone back and read 2, 3, 4 times. What is it about this book that draws you back to it 3 or 4 times?
Yeah, so I would say there's a couple chapters in there that really resonate, and I think John touched on it. Chapter 4 in particular, your strategy is not what you say it is, and it's really about how you allocate your time and resources as an individual. I think oftentimes we may have these overarching ideas about who we are and what our goals are, but then if you look at how you spend your time at work and at home, do those things align with your ultimate goals and how you define success? So I revisit this book really to recalibrate. It's an opportunity for me to read through that chapter again and take a reflection on how have I spent my time over the last days, weeks, months, and are the things that I'm doing, do they align with my ultimate goal for my career and for my family? So that one's very important to me. And then I would say chapter 6 is, that one's about empathy, and it has a weird title. It's what did you hire that milkshake for? And it's really about assessing situations and determining, am I going into this situation focused on what I want or what other people want? And really what I try to do is assess, what do other people need? What are their wants? What are the things that motivate them? And how do I help them get those things as a leader? And also with my family, what does my wife need? What do my children need? And not necessarily focus so much about what I need out of a specific situation at work or at home.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you doing that, but man, you just took a lot of energy from me. It immediately when you started talking about chapter 4, I just started thinking, I'm not a father. I don't know. It's my wife and I. We don't have children, so it allows me to have a lot more freedom than you guys do, obviously, especially in the work environment. And I can remember back up until about 2 or 3 years ago, just about 2 years ago, that my wife's the same way. You measure yourself in success within your professional life. We just take for granted our home life. And a couple of years ago, when just burning the candle on both ends, I realized, I was missing things in the personal life, just experiences, personal experiences, things that I want to do, or time away from the wife, and started trying to get better at creating those memories and those moments. So man, that set me back and really got me thinking very quickly. And so I look forward to, actually, I may move this book up a couple of slots now, and definitely look forward to getting to that chapter 4. So thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that question, Burton, because I think that's really something that people are going to want to know. And when they hear something like that, where they, oh, I've read this book multiple times. Well, why? And what it reminded me of, Burton, when you said that, not having kids has allowed you a little more professional freedom. I think I've told you guys the story. I was on a plane. I think I was on the plane ride to Houston a couple months back, and I'm sitting next to 2 other dads. I got the window seat, and I would, and here's how, you've, I hate to make this reference because I don't think these guys know who I am, but good, better, best. And so there's a new dad with a bunch of babies, and they're on the plane with him in the back. And then I would probably say I'm a medium experienced dad with some teenagers. And then the other dad who had the aisle seat was his kids were grown. And the 2 of us, the older dads, were telling him, enjoy these moments. You're going to love this age. This is a great age. And this dad, like in a true moment of vulnerability, he's like, yeah, I'm trying really hard. And he said, but I have to travel for work, so I miss a lot of what happens. And, we have technology. And he kind of made a passing comment about, like you guys didn't. And I'm like, I'm literally in it right now. I'm still raising my kids. And the funny thing is we don't use video calls. We talk on the phone multiple times a day. But then, he said something that just like punched me right in the freaking heart. He said, I try to convince myself that I'm doing this so they can have a better life. He said, but the reality is I'm doing this for my ego. And I kind of looked at him, and he goes, something breaks somewhere and I jump on a plane, I race there and I fix it, and I walk out of there feeling good about myself. And I tell myself that I'm building this legacy so that my kids can have a better life. He goes, but the reality is I like fixing things. I like making people happy. It makes me feel good. My kids have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm like, I'm sitting, I'm like, these words hurt, but he was right, because, if you go and ask my kids right now, what do I do? They don't really know. They can barely pronounce logistics. And I've been to the career fair, and I've put pictures up on the board, and my kids have seen these pictures, but they still have no clue what we do. They don't care about what we do right now. I think that in 10 or 15 years, they're going to look back, and then they'll understand, or they'll care, or they'll get a bad delivery from some guy and they're like, Dad, can you believe you did this? But so that chapter, Mike, it kind of hits, and that whole book really hits, and I'm glad that I listened to it when I did, because it did help me pivot to say, I would just, in our family, my wife and I have always prioritized our careers over everything else, and we've covered for each other whenever we needed to. When we'd say, hey, you just go do what you got to do, I got this. And my wife has specifically done that for at least the last 6 or 7 years. She sacrificed everything so that I could go off and do what I want to do. And I can't get lost in that fact. I cannot get lost in the fact that what I do to provide doesn't mean anything to them. And so it's really forced me. In fact, I think you guys know this. I bought a Jeep last year, and that's we just go out riding in the Jeep and we have fun. And we do, and I bought a canoe just to get out of the house when I'm home, get out on the lake, and really just make sure that time that I am home is valuable, so that when I have to hop on that plane and go somewhere, it doesn't sting as bad. Sorry, I probably dropped a little bit too much truth on that one.
No, John, when you were going through it, I was trying to take a quick look and recall a speaker. it finally hit me. What made me really start reflecting on things a couple of years ago, and it was a speaker we had that came through that was talking about purpose. And man, that when you ask somebody, what is your purpose? And of course they rattle off, oh, this is what my purpose is. And then you go, no, really, what's your real purpose? Why are you here? What is it you're supposed to do while you're here on earth? Man, I sat there and scratched my head, and it was a 30, 45-minute exercise, and we wrapped up, and my paper was it was just blank. I had nothing on it. And afterwards, I went and started talking to a couple of people, and asking them, what is your purpose? What do you see your purpose being? And one particular person started laughing, and they went just very quickly ran off their purpose, which had absolutely nothing to do with what the speaker had been talking about. But that just took me down a whole nother path. So again, Mike, I really appreciate this recommendation, and looking forward to another perspective on it. I think I am anyway. I'm almost scared now.
Nothing to be scared of, Burton. I think it is one of the better books out there for some self-reflection, but not just self-reflection, but it does what you just said. It kind of puts your purpose directly in your sights. And I think it helped me refine. It didn't make me, and I don't want you guys to think that it made me step back and say, oh, do I question what I'm doing? It helped me refine what I'm doing. It helped me refocus. And I think it really recharged me. And, we all have those moments where we step back and we're like, for me personally, this always happens. I get on a plane, I'm gone somewhere for a week, and the moment I touch down, something at home breaks. And that thing sets everybody off. And the funny thing is, this actually happened 2 weeks ago. I had no travel planned. The shower breaks in the kids' bedroom. And like the night before, we can't shut it off. Like, I got to shut the water off to the whole house to get this shower to shut off. Make the plans to get the plumber to come out. Plumber can't come out for like 2 days. My phone rings. Hey, can you go and do this thing? I'm like, sure, I can. And then I immediately start thinking, I have to have this fixed before I leave, or I'm not going to be able to focus on what I'm being asked to do. And, luckily for me, the stars aligned, somebody canceled, and I was able to get it fixed before I left. But, that's when you're on the road and those things happen and something breaks. And it's not that the people that, in my circle can't handle it, but I'm their venting post. I'm the person that they call and they let it out to. And of course, I'm a fixer. So I'm like, well, how can I fix this? Sometimes I can't fix it. So, but great book. And I want to, so Burton, you mentioned something about extreme ownership. And I'm a big fan. Everybody who knows me knows I'm a big fan. I'm constantly talking about extreme ownership. Mike and I have had this conversation, and I'm not going to speak for Mike because, quite frankly, I don't remember where Mike falls on the spectrum of extreme ownership, whether he likes or he doesn't like it. But I do remember Mike and I having a conversation where I had vented them like, I get it because I was in the Army. I understand it, but it doesn't really relate to business. It relates to your attitude, but how do I teach somebody who does not understand military tactics, extreme ownership? And then we stumbled upon this other book, and it has since become my favorite of the extreme ownership series, Leadership Strategy and Tactics. And I've told Mike about this book a few times. It's actually over there on the shelf. I'm too embarrassed to show it to you because the book is riddled with those sticky tabs out the side, and there's highlights and notes, and I've written all over it like it's a workbook. But like this book, this is one book similar to John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership that I have listened to more than once. I don't remember how many times I've listened to it. So I think, if I remember correctly, there aren't many books that I've listened to, less than 5 books I've listened to more than once. This is one of them. I don't know if you guys have read this book, but I believe so. The story behind the book is Jocko and Leaf went in to do a partnership with a business, and quite frankly, they don't say this, but I think they realized that my advice was right, and that it doesn't their stuff doesn't translate specifically. And so they did a workshop with a company, and this is the book that was born out of that, which is pretty specific to the workplace. Um, and anyway, so I'll just shut up there for a minute and ask you guys: have you guys read this book?
I have.
And Mike, what do you think? Am I way off base, or do you think it actually applies more to the business than the other two?
Yeah, I think this one has better business application. I think it's easier to digest for people who are in a corporate or business environment in terms of how does their leadership impact specific situations, strategizing to improve the workplace and operations. I think this one is really more geared towards that versus, extreme ownership, which I have also read. And you were right. I think Extreme Ownership is a great book. I think it's really great for people who understand or have been in a military environment or law enforcement or things of that nature. Because I think it's really specific to a lot of those. Yes, you can adapt some of that mentality, but I definitely think that this one is a much better book from a corporate business standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. Burton, have you read this book yet?
I haven't, and actually I was jotting it down, because I do recall one or both of you guys mentioning this months ago, and just completely slipped my memory to write it down to check it out. But yeah, I'll definitely be adding it to the list, because if I went through Extreme Ownership once, reading it second time listening to it, there's no doubt I'll really enjoy this model of it.
So, what I do want to point out, because Mike and I have actually swapped this note about Audible. We're both huge Audible fans, and it was funny because my wife introduced me to Hoopla a while back, mainly because I was spending way too much money on Audible, and she had a pretty valid point about Hoopla, that the books, you can get 10 of them a month for free if you have a local library card. And so I want to throw that out because we're suggesting all these books, and hopefully anybody watching this is getting all motivated and geared up, and they're writing all the books down and they're going to the links in the video to get the book. But I would just very briefly, I want to share this website, Hoopla. And obviously you can see, it shows my recently borrowed. And then, based on what I've read, I have read all these books already, but they're recommending them for me. But Hoopla, all you have to do is go to your local library, prove your address, get a library card. You can go download Hoopla and get 10 free book rentals a month. And I strongly recommend that to folks because it's a free option. And Audible does cost, I think, $15 a month, and you get one credit. And my wife is right. I probably, when specifically when Mike and I started swapping books, I would go in, I'd buy the 3 credits for $30 or whatever it was. And I was plowing through. And so I want to put that out there to anybody who's watching, that you don't have to pay for these books to listen to these books. And most of them are available at the library for free if you prefer to read them. So I want to go back to leadership strategy and tactics just for a second, because I expect Burton to ask me this question. Go ahead, Burton.
Well, I want to interrupt you real quick just because you just showed that. I noticed one of the last books you had up there, Everybody Matters by Bob Chapman. Just so happens I've got it. And what was your take on that one? And I think this may be, a transition into your next topic of discussion here. But as soon as I saw it, I went, I've got to ask, what was your take on it?
Yeah, you're gonna laugh, but I just downloaded it on Wednesday. So when we were at the office, I saw it on the shelf, and what I try to do every time I'm at the office is I try to see what books are added, and I download them. So I did start listening to it, I have not made it for past the first chapter, and I'll tell you why. Right now, Mike said something to me that piqued my curiosity, and so I actually, and Burton, you're gonna laugh because it's about you. So, um, Mike told me about my memory is so short. I got to pull this up so that I don't get it wrong. So I don't know if you can see this shoe dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's I downloaded this about 5 minutes after I downloaded Everybody Matters, because Mike told me that you have listened to this book multiple times, and so I'm like, well, if Burton's going to listen to it more than once, it's got to be good. And I'm halfway through it, and I'm loving the story so far. For those not aware, it's the story of Phil Knight and how Nike came into existence, and shockingly not an overnight success story. A lot of grind, a lot of failure, a lot of overcoming obstacles so far. So I got distracted. I got ADHD pretty bad. So
No, well, it's funny because when you're saying that, I got to laugh at something I've heard Mike mention recently, how he'll read 3 or 4 books at the same time. That's over me. I can't do it. One at a time. That's all I'm capable of.
no, I do the same thing. And for me, and I'll tell you why. It's about my mood. And so there's a book. And this may spawn an additional episode that we record. So I'll tell you, there's a book that I'm reading right now, The Need to Be Whole by Wendell Berry. It's a really long book. I've got 7 hours left in the book, but for me, it's all about the mood that I'm in, and I won't go too much into detail because it'll change the course of this conversation. But what I would recommend is I'll throw that link in the video in the comments of this as well. It's a different kind of book. It's not really a leadership book. It's more of a history book, and I think it's read by Nick Offerman, who I'm really a big fan of. If you guys don't know him, he's from Parks and Rec. I love his character is hilarious, but the human is even better. And I've read a bunch of his books. He's got great character. He's got great integrity. And he tells some real interesting stories, and he's just kind of a no frills kind of guy. He is who he is. And so the other thing, I think you guys know, my wife is a Audible voice actress. And so I'm not ashamed to say this on YouTube, but I will listen to my wife's books, specifically at night when I get back to the hotel and I just need to unwind. The one thing I love about my relationship is my wife is kind of my center, and she balances me out. And so yes, I will listen to multiple books at the same time. A couple of the takeaways out of the leadership strategies and tactics that I want people to know about is there's a lot of good stuff in there, whether you're an employee, whether you're a leader, whether you're a CEO. And some of the things that really stuck out to me was communication and the appropriateness of timely communication, the appropriateness, and it resonated with me because what I've always told people is, I've told people in my direct chain of command, I'll tell you what I can tell you when I can tell you it. And if you ask me a direct question, sometimes the answer is going to be, I can't talk about that right now. And it doesn't mean it's top secret. It just means there's moving pieces and moving parts that I'm still trying to bring together. But it's big on communication because communicating effectively keeps an organization healthy. It keeps people from being worried about tomorrow, being worried about the future, because they know where they stand. And it's funny, Burton, you said this yesterday, and I took it as a compliment when you said, people who have reported to me, they either love me or they hate me because I'm super direct and I hold them accountable. And sometimes that super directness comes across as aggressive or sarcasm, but it's meant with 100% of my heart because I want people to be better, and I want to be better. And that's one thing I've appreciated about my relationship with the two of you. I love the fact that I can call you and I can unload on you of what's going on, and you hear me, and you don't try to zero out what I'm going through. You don't try to minimize or quickly fix. Um, and then whether you agree with me or not, you always present the other side of the story. And Mike, I think I told you Burton did this to me yesterday, and and like it got me where I'm like, all right, Burton, I hear you. I know where you're going with that, and it did alter my course of the day, and I think ultimately it has altered the course of the next probably couple months, because it refocused me on what's important. So I think there's a lot of great nuggets in that book, and quite frankly, guys, I think we could probably talk for like an hour on any one of these books.
Yep, absolutely.
And I'm glad you guys gave me your Saturday morning to do this, especially after a long week of meetings and social engagements.
Absolutely. And John, you sort of threw it out there. I'd love to circle up, do another one of these with you guys. And you were sort of teeing up, different leadership philosophies and approaches. And I think that would be an interesting part two of our conversation, because I've always respected y'all's approach. And of course, I'm a believer you can't take. I can take a couple of tools out of John's tool bag, a couple out of Mike's, and a couple out of the other people's tool bags that I respect, and have to use it in the best manner I know how. We can't, we're not all identical to one another, and we all have a little different philosophies, and would love to dive a little bit deeper into that sometime with you guys, and share some of my thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, I think that would be phenomenal, and I think it'd be for those watching. Burton can be a super animated conversationalist. He's really behaving himself right now, but he's probably one of my favorite people when he gets to telling some of his stories, and which is why when the opportunity for this popped up, I was like, let's do this. We have got to get on a call together.
Well, John, you did say we have to keep it professional, so I'm on my best behavior for you today.
So yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Burton, because here's Burton and Mike know me well, and they know that I can have a potty mouth sometimes, and I have tried to keep the YouTube videos pretty clean, because not only my 12-year-old daughter subscribes and gets notified every time a video goes live, but her friends do as well. And there's one guy that I've done a couple videos with. He lives in Iowa. He's a trainer and a coach, and he has no filter. And one of my neighbors pointed out, who watched some of my videos, is like, that's not really aligned with your brand. You're kind of the goody two shoes, Mr. Positive. And I was like, well, you haven't worked with me.
Right.
Well played, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, my wife said to me one time, while she was coaching me on my language, she said, I just don't understand. You're such a complicated person. I said, how am I complicated? I'm pretty simple. She goes, no. She goes, you can go to church, you can teach Sunday school, and not a single cuss word falls out of your mouth. But the second you get in the car, and I'm like, I go, well, I have a mode I go into. She's like, well, you need to be in church mode all the time. So I'm trying. So
it's a work in progress for all of us, John.
yeah, it is, and I like to refer to someone smart one time said that you can tell you're dealing with somebody honest when they cuss a lot. I'm like, well, I'm honest. So, because I definitely need to clean up my language. So I think I do want to very quickly, there's one other book I want to pop up here on the screen, and only because I've mentioned it a few times, and I believe I've told you guys the story about how this book absolutely changed my life, not just my leadership style, but my life. And have you guys read this book, John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership?
Yep.
I have not.
It's been several years, but yes.
So I read this book for the first time, I think in 1999 or 2000. And I've already said it once, but the part of it that every chapter of the book clicked with me at that time. And it was, and actually I listened to it on cassette tapes. So I don't know if Mike, were cassette tapes still around when you were coming up?
Wow. The Walkman was popular in the 80s and 90s. Yes.
Okay. Burton, you notice how he didn't answer the question. Actually, he said, yes, the Walkman was popular in those 2 decades, but um, not that he was alive in those
I
decades.
noticed that.
I am an 80s baby, so yes, I had a Walkman and I was an avid listener.
Yeah. So
Mike had
there's,
Mike had the CD version of the Walkman.
uh, I love the no denial there, but yeah. So anyway, I may have had those cassettes right up until I moved to Detroit in 2017. That and you know what, they might even be in a box in the basement. That set of cassettes was like the most powerful. We had a Jeep Cherokee at the time, and I had to borrow my wife's car to drive to and from Topeka, Kansas from Manhattan, because she had a cassette player in her car and my car did not. Um, but man, it changed the direction for me. Yeah, and I think what it did for me at the time was I was really just kind of lost. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to college and not having a fun time. Didn't know what I wanted to major in. Um, and I walked into a bookstore. It's bankrupt and gone now, but the concept was pretty cool. It was a bookstore, a music store. Where they did sell some musical instruments, but they were mostly just for toys. But they sold records, vinyl, CDs, tapes. Um, and it was a movie rental store too. So when I started there, you could still rent cassette tapes, and then they switched over to DVDs while I was there. And the whole experience for me was, it was what I needed at the time. My wife's set of friends that she had socialized with, they all worked there. And so we went in there only because they said, hey, you should come check out this new store. It's better than Blockbuster. And so we go in, and like everybody was having so much fun doing their job. And I'd worked retail before, and I'm like, these people are making retail look fun. I want to work here. And my wife looked at me. She's like, you're going to make like $5 an hour working here. I proved her wrong. I made $8 an hour. And I quickly moved up to $8.30 an hour because I got promoted to manager. And so, but it was a unique time where I learned a lot about team building. And it really cracked open this door that we're talking about today, where I found my learning style, and I just started plowing through audiobooks. Every audiobook I could find, I would just devour. And so it's something that I encourage. And I think what I hear a lot is people tell me, oh, I don't have time to read. And I'll throw that myth right in the trash, because you drive to work, you take a shower, hopefully. There's times where you can fit in 10 minutes a day of listening to something. And I'll say, if you don't have that time, get up and go for a walk, and just, walk around the building, just do something for yourself for 10 minutes a day. And what you're going to find is, will it take you 3 months to listen to a book? Maybe. But if you listen to the book, you will take so much away from it. And again, to the point we made earlier, maybe you don't take everything away from it. There are times where people will say to me, oh, I love that part of this book. And I'm like, I don't remember that part of that book. And I'll have to go back and re-listen to it. I'm like, oh, they're right. And I'm like, I don't remember hearing that chapter. But I know I did. So a big advocate for it. If you don't like Hoopla, there's other apps out there that you can do. I think Microsoft owns Libby. There's some internet chatter that Libby might be going away, but it's a free option. And I believe they offer 10 free rentals a month. Their selection is not very good. So what I like to do is I now add everything to my Audible playlist. The moment Mike Brown tells me about a good book, that's right where it goes. And then what I'll do, usually on a Sunday as I'm preparing for the next week, is I'll go through and I'll load up my queue. So I'll go to Audible, I'll grab a book title, I'll go to Hoopla and see if I can find it for free. If I find it for free, I borrow it, I download it. And with Hoopla, if you fly a lot, you do have to download it because Hoopla is a web-based application. And so you have to download the book or it doesn't play on the airplane. So that is the one downfall. But, for me, I can get a good, and I listen to it at like 1.25 speed. And really all that does is it cuts out all the dead air. Unless like sometimes I'm really into it and I'm taking feverish notes, then I'll slow it down because I can't write that fast.
Funny you say that, Jocko, when he's narrating, 1.25 is where I have to go. Otherwise, he kills me. Kills me.
He does. So there's a book. I have it over there on the shelf. It's Discipline Equals Freedom. And he didn't record that audio for a while. He put the book out, but then I found it on YouTube, which I've now learned you can speed YouTube up as well. I did not know this at the time, but when I was in Los Angeles for something, I don't remember what project I was on, but I was there for a week. And I remember what I would do is at the end of the night, because it's West Coast time and my family was in bed, I would go to the parking lot and I would walk in circles in the parking lot because I was still on the hotel's Wi-Fi, and I would listen to those to that book on YouTube. And man, if you don't know who Jocko is, I have a gravelly voice, but that man takes it to a whole new level, and he talks so slow, and that YouTube video is creepy as hell. So anyway.
Surely he gets more excited, or at least did back in his days of action. And that's what I just kept thinking about when I listened to him. I was going, man, when bullets are flying, surely he speaks faster and he gets more excited than this.
It's interesting that you say that, Burton, because I would hope so too. And Mike, I don't know if you guys did this in your police academy training, but that was part of when I went through boot camp. That was kind of part of the strategy is
Calm me down.
Yep, slow it down. And I've used that strategy multiple times in my non-military life of when everything is just going crazy, you got to just bring it down. You got to just slow all the chaos down, and it helps you make better decisions. So he's a genius. I'll give him that. Super motivational. But yeah, I'm with you, Burton. I got to speed him up. So this is funny. I mentioned my neighbor. I just got a text message from my neighbor that his son is watching my YouTube videos.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So guys, I really appreciate you doing this. I want to try to keep it to the hour that I asked for. And what I'd love to throw another one on the calendar so we can get together again and dive a little deeper. And of course, by then we'll all have probably plowed through 3 more books. All of the links to these videos, all the links to these books will be in the comments section of this video. I will also share the links everywhere this video is shared on social media. Burton, Mike, thank you so much, not just for joining me here today, but I'm really grateful for your friendship. My life is better because the two of you are in it, so I thank you.
Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. It's a pleasure.